Get ready for a dark fairy tale twist on Little Red Riding Hood. In this tutorial, I'll show you how you can make the classic crimson hooded cloak and transform it into an undead vampire version of Red Riding Hood. Hi, my name is Matilda and welcome back to Miss Matti. Today I dressed up as a vampire for you. Although I had to skip vampire teeth because I find when you're wearing vampire teeth, it's really hard to speak clearly. And I want to spare you from me speaking with those teeth in. And why I dressed up as a vampire is because we are making an undead Little Red Riding Hood costume. Or rather, we are making the cape or cloak and dressing up as an undead Little Red Riding Hood. Oh, and also a little bit of a heads up. I will be using both the word cloak as well as the word cape interchangeably throughout this whole video. This was a little bit of a redemption project for me because back in 2007, I rushed to make a last minute Little Red Riding Hood costume and the seams on the cape I made was a complete mess. And ever since, I have been itching to redo this project. So this is the only picture I could find of that Halloween costume. I vaguely remember that there were other photos of my costume where you could see the full cape and the full costume, but it might have been on someone's Facebook and now the photos are long gone. Ever since I have wanted to remake the cloak, I have wanted to put a little bit of a dark twist on Red Riding Hood and maybe turn her into an undead version that is in league with a wolf. But this year that idea was vetoed because my husband decided to go as the woodsman and the wolf skull ended up in my picnic basket instead. I do not know how, but they did. If you're new to sewing and want to make your own cloak or cape, do not worry. Capes are really good beginner projects, and as long as you take your time, you will avoid all the mistakes I did back in 2007. For my cloak, I used crimson red wool polyester coating, matching cassia lining. If you do not know what cassia lining is, it is a satin-backed flannel, perfect for winter coats, as it's warm and durable. The lining features a smooth satin finish on one side and a cozy brushed back on the other side. Matching thread. I also got a red satin ribbon, which didn't match, but I fixed that later. So here is a quick tip for you. If you're making a timeless costume like Little Red Riding Hood, invest in quality fabrics. Of course, you do not need to pick as expensive fabrics as I did, but I highly recommend you to choose the best fabrics that you can afford. I made my own pattern for this project, and if you also want to make your own pattern, I highly recommend you to go and check out Professor Pincushion's tutorial. Her process is very similar to how I drafted mine, although not exactly the same, but I think her tutorial is one of the best I found out there, so yeah, go and check that out if you're interested. For the Little Red Riding Hood cloak, I decided to go for a big rounded hood. I cut out 2 pieces on the grain in both my coating and lining fabric. I made the cloak part as a full circle skirt, but instead of using the waist measurement, I used my neck measurement to make sure it fit around the shoulders. For length, I went with 89 centimeters to cover my bum, but you can adjust the length to your preference. I added 3 centimeters seam allowance for the outer hem and 1 centimeter for the lining hem, and then 1 centimeter seam allowance for all other seams. After cutting, I created notches for key points like the center back, center neck, and the front edges on both fabrics. I started by stay stitching the neck curve on both the outer fabric and the lining, a crucial step for keeping the shape intact. I also added a hidden double welt pocket to the lining for essentials like my phone and cards. I will not explain what I do here in great detail, but if you want to make your own welt pockets, I highly recommend you to check out either of my tutorials on single and double welt pockets. Though I might need to update the double welt one, it's a bit dated. Making a welt pocket isn't hard, but it is easy to mess up. Even with nearly 20 years of practice, I wasn't happy with how this one turned out. The heavy coating fabric made it bulky, and my cutting of the pocket opening wasn't my best. I spent ages pressing and tweaking and even considering replacing the pocket entirely by making a second pocket in only the lining fabric as a backup. The second attempt was definitely better, but my husband was like, the original is fine, you really need to move on. And reluctantly, I agreed. This being a redemption project and a project I'm filming, it made me overcritical. And in the end, I reminded myself, progress over perfection, and sometimes good enough is good enough. I then proceeded with my project while slowly trying to let go of my perfectionism and to be kind to myself. As I couldn't find a matching ribbon in the stores, I looked around in my stash and found a gift ribbon that matched the red on my cloak perfectly. The catch? It had a Crabtree and Evelyn logo on it. To cover it up, I considered a couple of options, either folding the ribbon in half or covering it up with a ribbon attached on top like this, or covering the text with red iron-on foil. In the end, I decided to cover the logo with red iron-on foil. I cut several strips of foil on my quick cut and then pressed them on. And voila, a completely new matching ribbon. Then I base stitched the ribbon on top of the cloak opening and then pinned and stitched the lining and cloak together at the hem. After pressing the hem into its 3 cm fold, I pinned the front openings of the coating and lining together and then stitched them together, making sure not to catch the ribbon or welt pocket bag while sewing. Next, I understitched the lining to keep it from rolling towards the edge. Before top stitching, I pinned both the hem folds of the lining and the coating fabric to secure them in place, and then I top stitched 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. To reinforce the bottom hem, I used iron-on hem tape inside the coating fabric. This will help the hem stay in place with a crisp fold. I then base stitched the lining and coating fabric together at the neck curve before starting to assemble the hood. I pinned the 2 pieces of the hood together in both the coating and lining fabric and then stitched them together. Once that was done, I pressed the seams open with a tailor's ham. And pin the lining 1 cm inward at the bottom for a neat finish. Then I sewed the 2 pieces together, making sure that the fold stayed in place at each side. I also understitched the lining on the hood and then pressed the fold with my iron before top stitching the hood like I did on the cloak opening. To attach the hood, I pressed a 1 cm lining seam allowance inward and then pinned only the outer hood to the cloak. Then I sewed the outer part of the hood to the cloak on my sewing machine. Finally, I base stitched the hood lining to the cloak lining before hand stitching them together with a ladder stitch. Once that step was complete, I removed the basting stitches before giving the cloak a final press. And here it is, my undead Little Red Riding Hood cloak. If you enjoyed this twisted take on a classic fairy tale, do not forget to like, subscribe, and also let me know in the comments down below what did you dress up as this Halloween. And until next time, bye!